Welcome to the MCC Swiss League. Key highlights from the games played. Commentary from ACME. The first move is knight c3. It's the Van Geek opening. It's an unconventional chess opening that it made us to develop the knights. We have knight f3, g3, bishop g2 from white, then c3, c5, d6, knight f6 from black, creating a pawn chain. Black is setting up the castles and then push for a pawn break. White has developed nicely. Kingside bishop on a diagonal, knights protecting the key squares. White trade off the queenside knight and pawn to activate her bishop. Black plays bishop to f6 to create a stare off like in the western. c4 or e5 was better. If white captures the bishop, it will lead to a double pawn for black. White chose c3, which was a mistake. They both will go for simplifying the position and activating the rooks. Black trade the knight with check to create double pawns in white pawn structure, which will be a long-term weakness for white and create imbalances. Black is pushing his pawns to trade off to create a pass pawn. A pass pawn is a pawn without any opponent's pawn in front of it. Pawn to e5 is an inaccuracy because after trading off, it will leave an unprotected pawn. White would be better served strategically if she moves the queen to e2. Black is one pawn up, but white has an open file and more active pieces for compensation. White plays pawn to a4, which is a blunder because it creates a pass pawn for black by trading two white pawns for one black pawn. The only reason for white to play this is to play for a draw. Better idea for white was putting the rook on c1, putting the queen on c2, and putting more pressure on the c5 black pawn. White has identified a checkmating pattern, but black is in time to trade off the rooks.
Check.
We have queen and 5 pawns versus queen and 3 pawns. This is where geometry on the board is important. This is why reading endgame manuals is very important. Black playing e5 is a blunder because it creates a weakness in the king's pawn structure and allows white to check and enter into the palace and pick up the pawns. And after c4, white offered a draw because she realized that the game is a draw, but she does not know how to play it out. Black reject the draw. If she found queen to g8, it would have been a theoretical draw. But as you can see, she didn't, and she traded the queens, which is an error or a blunder, which is a massive error because it leads to a king versus king and 2 pawns endgame, which is a loss. This game of Lee versus Williams is a very educational game. It's very eye-opening for players under 1200. You get to learn about pawn structure, pass pawn, double pawn, and why exchanging pieces just for exchanging sake is not advisable. You may be wondering what's the difference between a theoretical draw versus a practical draw. Let's look at the Lee versus Williams game from the position where white could have joined the game. A theoretically drawn game, when played by computer versus computer, always leads to a join endgame, while when it's human versus human, 99% of the time it leads to one of the opponents winning if the opponents aren't master level players. This is because human beings are prone to error and making 15 plus perfect moves is very hard.
Check.
While a practical join game is a game which the chances of the game join is easy, nothing complex is in the game, and any player from there understand chess can get the game join. Is normally a pawn and a bishop versus a pawn and a bishop of opposite color, always ending a draw. A chess game can be joined in multiple ways: by stalemate, which means the king has no legal moves, and or if the pieces the king command does not have any legal moves. By insufficient material, which means the pieces that's on the board cannot checkmate the king. For example, king and bishop versus king and bishop of opposite colors. By the third reposition of the same sequence of moves. By the 50 moves rule, which state that after 50 moves without a pawn move, the game will be declared a draw. This is why they say this is a theoretical draw and not a practical draw. As you can see on the board, white has made 15 perfect moves to guide the game along, but it hasn't been drawn as yet. You need a lot of perfect moves to get this game drawn, and this is why it's called a theoretical draw. This is the way I'm a chess fan, and I'm from Manchester. Yeah, I'm a monkey, right. And here we go, we have a Queen's Gambit accepted on the board. I think it's the old variation. We have different time control. Williams has 25 minutes and Eid has 10 minutes. So the decisions on moves have been very difficult. That's why we have some bad moves. Both players have chosen to castle short. They both have knights in the middle trying to protect key squares. They're going for a similar development. This is a big blunder by black. I think he misclicked. He was trying to put the bishop on b4. By moving it to where it's at now, it will create a fork by the pawn. Black is trying to activate his pieces to have more active pieces than white to compensate for the minor piece that he lost. White knight is pinned to the queen, and as two attackers, two defender, the queen have to move to add another defender on it. Black is trying to centralize his queen. White use the rook to attack the queen, removing the queen from the file, and then exchange the bishops to simplify the game to have a better endgame. White is still up a minor piece. That minor piece is the knight that he won in the early stages of the game. Black has to make accurate moves while thinking, oh, he can guide the endgame into a enjoyable endgame, and black chance of getting a result from the game is decreasing every time white remove a pawn from the board, and it's getting very, very hard to see a result from this game. Williams is applying pressure, and white with his advantages just playing the game very accurately, trying to simplify the game because he has more pieces. He can eventually win the game. He's just applying the pressure. Very good, very good. And this is what a mistake or a blunder in the opening of the game can affect the entire game. And this game was played at a very accurate level. Williams had 96% accuracy, Eid had 90% accuracy, so it was a top-notch game. But the blunder in the first half of the game turned out to be crucial. Congratulations to Williams on winning the April MCC Swiss League, and thank you all for participating. We had a good turnout.